What's going on, guys? Welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Today we're going to give you what could be the most important tip video for Lake Fork bass fishing in all of 2022. And after watching this video, anybody will be able to go fish the best kind of structure on Lake Fork just like the pros do. Before we get into this video, let me explain a little bit about what I mean about how this might be the most important video that you can watch for Lake Fork bass fishing in 2022. You guys, we're dealing with low water conditions. And in all likelihood, we're going to continue to deal with low water conditions throughout the year. We've dropped down to 6 foot low. Yeah, it may fill up some. Very doubtful that it's actually, if you look back, just statistically, it's not likely that it's going to necessarily fill up in 1 year from 6 foot low. So we're going to deal with low water conditions. Now, what that means is, for a lot of the year, especially right now, going forward all the way through springtime till we get to summer when those fish pull out on more points and pond dams and humps, stuff like that, we're going to be dealing with creek channels, guys. The structure that these fish are going to relate to is going to be creek channels almost exclusively right now going forward. And even once we get to the summer, there will be plenty of fish that will still relate to those creek channels. There always is. But more especially when the lake is low and Lake Fork is devoid of grass, these creek channels become such an important player. I cannot express to you how important it is to understand where creek channels and drains and low spots are located and understand how to properly position your boat and how to properly keep your lure around those creek channels at times can be. So today's video is actually one that we filmed last year, but it's a really in-depth instruction on how to use any type of electronics to catch more bass around creek channels in the wintertime. We're going to show you how to map it out, how to identify it, how to locate it. You're going to be able to know as much about a creek channel on Lake Fork after you watch this video and go use it as somebody like myself who's fished there for years. So take a watch to this. If you guys watch this video and you go put this into practice, you literally will be able to fish creek channels exactly like the pros.
Now, one thing about fishing creek channels, it's a very precise game. It's not a big, huge main lake point. It's not a big hump. It's not a big roadbed. It's not always real obvious where exactly the creek channels and especially the prime spots like the bends of the creek are located. Our mapping, I don't care how good your mapping is, that blue line that marks the creek channel does not always show you exactly where that creek channel bends and every little outcropping and junction and things like that. Today, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to take any electronic device. As long as you got a GPS map and a 2D sonar, hey, side imaging, downscan, all that's great. But all you need for this is a map and 2D sonar. I'm going to show you how to take any type of electronics and go out and make a very precise, detailed map that will allow you to fish creek channels with more accuracy, more precision, and more efficiency, and that's going to lead you to catch more big bass this winter. One thing I really want you guys to pay attention to is, as I'm showing you guys how to map out these creek channels, I really want you to pay attention to how much of the creek channel is actually outside or away from the blue line that's marked as the creek channel on our map. Hey, I've taken map cards out of my graph. I don't have any Navionics in here today. This is just a base map that comes on Lowrance Lives. It might be a little bit better than some other base maps, but it doesn't matter because we're not paying any attention to the contour lines. We're not paying any attention to the creek channel line other than a general area of where that creek can be. We're actually making our own map. So we're going to start out at the mouth of a major creek arm. We're going to find an area where two creek channels come together in a junction. We're going to start right there and move our way back, zigzagging back and forth across that creek, going all the way back in. And every time we come across that drop off and that rise on either side of that creek channel, we're going to mark a waypoint. Hey, if you've got side imaging like I'm fortunate to have, you can do this a lot faster because you can see the creek running out to the side on your side image and mark either side of the channel on that as well. You can even see the bends and some of the little secondary loops and junctions and drains from little pockets and just little drains down the main bank that come into play that you would never ever find on a map. All of these things can be higher percentage areas. The main two things we're looking for are bends and junctions. We want to mark the whole creek channel, but we really want to pay attention when we're fishing to the creek bends, especially the sharper ones, and the junctions. Those are both very important factors when you're looking at creek channels. And as an added bonus, if you can find a sharp bend or a junction that correlates to a main lake point, a secondary point, any type of other structure that might be within that creek arm that you're fishing, that's always a bonus as well. All right, so if you look right here, even if you only have 2D sonar on your graph, you have mapping and 2D sonar, you can still mark your waypoints. You see I marked a waypoint there on the channel edge and a waypoint there on the channel edge. Now obviously it's going to be better to have side imaging where you can look out the sides and you can mark much bigger sections of the channel. But if you are adamant enough and you want to work hard enough at it, you can go with the 2D sonar and mark channel edges and just zigzag back and forth across the channel. You can just zigzag back and forth across the channel, marking those channel edges, and mark yourself a really accurate, good map of the creek channel edges. Just need a map in 2D sonar. You don't have to have the latest and greatest. It does help to have side imaging though. It makes it a lot more efficient. Okay, so what we're starting to see is a general shape here. If you look right here, we got the outside bend in the main channel, comes down here, and you can kind of see where one channel comes between these two dots, runs around here, makes a big bend, and runs down this way. The other channel jumps off right here. So you've got a junction right there. But what I can do now is I can get on my front trolling motor and look at these waypoints and keep my boat right on the inside of this bend if I want to. Keep my boat right here at this junction, fish that point. I can really make sure that my bait stays around those creek channel edges as I move in and out of this pocket the entire time. Hey, we're just getting started. We're not done yet. We can see this line. We got to go over here. And what's funny is you guys can see the junction's actually marked over here, but the actual junction is right here. And you can also see there's a bend right here that's not marked on the map at all. This blue line is the creek channel marking on this map. Well, it's not marked on the map at all. This is a pretty sharp bend out here that could produce some good bites. Also, the main line of the creek over here is off from this. So if you were going along throwing at your blue line on your map, you'd be off. You'd really need to be over here. That's why this can be so important. So as you can see, we're going along. We're getting a pretty good image of what our creek channel looks like. I'm going to go ahead and map out this whole creek, and we're going to show you what it looks like when we're all done. So we've gone along, we've marked a ton of waypoints, and we've got really what I feel like is a pretty darn good map of this creek. Now it's time for us to pick out our highlighted sections. So right here where we first started, there was a creek channel that came in this way and a creek channel that came in this way, and then the rest of the creek been out here after they joined. But I marked a stop sign right there. I labeled it junction. Junctions and bends, like we said, are a high point of interest. So I'm going to mark all of the best bends and junctions that I just mapped out. Right up here you can see a very distinct outside bend right there. Hey, we're going to go ahead and mark that one as well. And if you'll look, all of these bends right here, okay, I marked a bend here, and even a bend up here. The reason I did that is because there's a big main lake point right here, and these bends all correlate to that main lake point. They're pretty close to it. So those were really interesting bends. I want to fish all these creek bends that are next to this main lake point. As we continue to go, most of these bends are close to the bank on this stretch right here, and you can see that as being evidenced by the blue line that's the creek channel that's marked there. But one bend stuck out outside the creek channel and made a sharp, really sharp bend out here. So I marked that one just because that one was so much different than the rest of the creek channel in that stretch. One thing I really want you guys to take note of, look at this blue line and look at how much stuff is featured off of that blue line. All of these stop signs, none of them are on that blue line. These maps that they mark are never precise on these creek channels. And when you're talking about fishing a creek channel, you're talking about fishing one of the smaller pieces of offshore structure that you can find. So it's really important to map this out like this and get precise with it. Now up here is going to be another junction. See this little pocket off to our right here? Right here where we've got just a ton of waypoints jumbled up, there's going to be a stop sign right there. That's another junction. This stop sign right here is because this creek comes in here and you can see all my waypoints. And when I zoom way in, you can kind of make sense out of it a little bit. But there's a lot of zigzag and craziness going on with the creek. Hey, and it's right next to this point. And it has a huge drop off. It goes from mid to high teens in depth to 5 foot in depth on top of that point right there. So I really like that spot right there. And out here's another junction from this pocket. Up here, there's a drain that comes out and joins the main channel right here. Once again, we get over here, I've got another stop sign marked. This is another junction. You can see this bigger pocket right here. And the creek channel does a lot of bending around. And when I zoom in, you can see my stop sign. Creek comes in, makes a hard bend. The other drain feeds into it. Just a lot of craziness going on in the creek channel right there. But as you guys can see, a lot of this, again, outside the blue line, you wouldn't find it. If you were trying to fish the blue line on your map, you would not be hitting the key parts of this creek. Here's another bend that I really like, just the sharpness of the drop off. So I went ahead and stop sign that. But when we zoom back out, you guys can kind of see, man, we've got a ton of waypoints marked on here, and we've got a really good map that we can now follow as we fish this creek. And the big key component, the most important thing, is when I get on these waypoints and I'm up there pitching my jig around or however I'm fishing it, I know without a doubt that every cast I make is in a high percentage area. I know I'm going to be hitting the drop-offs in the creek channels. I know I'm going to be hitting the bends. I know exactly where everything is. And anytime that I can be more efficient and have my bait in a highly likely strikeable position of higher percentage of the day, that 1000% is going to increase my success rate fishing. All right, let's take a brief moment and give you guys a couple tips on how to actually go about fishing these creek channels. Probably the most popular way, and my personal favorite way to do it, is to throw a jig. And what you want to do is you want to get that jig to get up on the top side of that creek channel on the flat, and you want to drag it to where it falls and tumbles down into the creek channel. A lot of times you'll hit exposed root systems, your jig will catch, and you'll pop it off there, and it'll pop off and boom, fall straight down into that root system, right off the edge of that drop off into the creek. And a lot of times that's where you're going to get your bites, especially your biggest bites will come on a jig as it pops off a root system and falls down into the channel. You get a lot of big reaction bites, even when it's super cold and they don't want to bite. But when I'm fishing a jig around a creek channel, I'm always trying to throw it at least a 45-degree angle, if not a straight 90 across the creek channel, and get it up on the high side, drag it, then let it free fall down into the channel. That's how I like to fish a jig in creek channels. Typically, I'm using a 1/2 ounce black and blue jig. I'm using a 7.7 Heavy Sensory Series rod, 20-pound fluorocarbon, and a high-speed gear ratio reel like 7.5 to 1. I like throwing it on a Hypermag. I like throwing it on the Team Lose Light Speed Spool. I want a light reel. I want a light setup where I can have all the sensitivity in the world, because a lot of these jig bites in the winter, some of them will be hard when they react to it as it falls. They'll hit it hard, but a lot of them, they'll just kind of suck it in and hold it, and you'll just pick up on it. It'll feel mushy. You better swing, because a lot of the bites can be really subtle. So light and sensitive setup as possible. At the same time, I need a lot of power. That 7.7 Heavy Sensory Series rods is a really good rod for jig fishing. Another great way to fish these creek channels, especially right now, earlier on in the year when the water temps are a little bit higher, is going to be a shaky head, a finesse shaky head. A 1/4 ounce shaky head is a great bait to throw around these creek channel edges and drains and such like that. When the water temps continue to drop throughout the winter, I really lean more towards the jig, but right now a shaky head's a great way to do it. One other thing, if you're noticing fish on your front graph or on your main graph, when you're easing around in there, if you're noticing a lot of bait fish suspending, maybe you got a warmer day, a sunnier day, and the bait fish rise up above the creek channel, start suspending around the timber, man, a suspending jerkbait. Find you a jerkbait that'll get to the depth where you're marking fish suspending at. A jerkbait can be one of the most effective ways. Also, an Alabama rig, if you rig the swim baits on your Alabama rig weedless, and you can see most of your stumps around the creek channel, you can really fish an Alabama rig around a creek channel pretty efficiently. Only suggest that when the fish are climbing up and suspending in the trees. I don't want to even try to throw an Alabama rig near the bottom around a creek channel. And one other way that can be very effective, believe it or not, is cranking. Now, you are going to lose some crankbaits, but if you get some crankbaits and can get down there and hit those root systems, cranking a creek channel is one of the most underutilized and most effective ways to get big cold water fish to bite. And to decide which crankbait you want to use, if you got a creek channel that's 4 or 5 foot on the top side, basically I just want the crankbait to hit bottom on the top side of the creek channel on the flat. It doesn't have to hit bottom down in the bottom of it, but I need it to hit the bottom as it comes into the creek channel, get those deflections off those root systems of the stumps, and that's what's going to draw your bites when it bounces off that stuff. So if I'm fishing a shallow creek channel, 4 foot on top, hey, I might throw the 3.8 mini mag. If I'm fishing a 10-foot creek channel, I might go for a medium diving crankbait like the MD250 from 6 Cents. If I'm going to go ahead and fish a 15 to 20 foot creek channel, then I'm going to start looking at the Cloud9 series, C15, C20, maybe even C25. But I always want to find the right crankbait that's going to get just deep enough to hit the bottom right before it goes into the creek channel. Hey guys, this is a time-consuming deal going out here mapping these creek channels like this, but I'm telling you, it's something that I highly recommend all of you guys doing, because it's a way to stay relevant in a time of year when a lot of people struggle to catch any fish at all in the wintertime. You can get out here, you can catch good numbers of fish, you can catch some of the biggest fish of the year around creek channels in the winter. And not only that, when you map it out for yourself, you can find little subtleties, little junctions, little bends, like some of the stuff we showed you today. You may be the only one that ever fishes it because it's not on a map. It's something that is hard to find, and that's so important these days. With the advancement of electronics, it's becoming harder and harder to find your own water that somebody else isn't going to find. You can really take advantage of having something to yourself by taking the time to go out, do your homework, and map out your own creek channels. Hey, I sure appreciate you guys watching today. I sincerely hope that this will help you catch more and bigger fish this winter. I have no doubt if you put this into practice, you'll be happy with the results. Hey, thanks once again for watching. We'll see you next time right here on your Lake Fork Guide.